The Cowboys go on the defensive in the NFL draft. So where do they all play? Next on the Blitz. Oh, what a weekend it was last week, the National Football League draft, and what a week it has been here at the Star in Frisco. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans. Welcome to the Blitz. You know, I look at it every year, Kyle, when the draft is over. There's so much, well, there's a lot of work behind the scenes here. The work we put in compares nothing to what goes on down the hallway here at the Star, but it's almost like it's December 26th, the day after the draft. You had all the anticipation, you open your gifts, and now here it is.
You're exactly right. You got to finally figure out where to put them. What shelves are you going to put these presents on? You unwrapped it. You got to throw away the gift wrap and the paper. All the hubble blue or whatever you call it, it's all gone now. Now it's time to put the gifts away and find a way to store them for the future.
And sometimes you have to put the gifts together. If it's a developmental player, you got to put it together. It's going to take a little bit more time before you can play with that
toy. Get
the
wrench out.
All right. But the week after the draft also can be a sobering week for guys that are already on NFL rosters. And across the league, cuts were made throughout this past week. You got to make room for the new guys on the rosters. And the Cowboys cut some players earlier this week. The most notable on this list is the veteran defensive tackle Antoine Woods. But also notable from this list, Savion Smith, as well as Ladarius Hamilton, Keemon Hall, they all got picked up by other teams on waivers.
Yeah, very quickly for those guys that were not necessarily on the open market for long. We'll start with Antoine Woods and kind of hit what he has meant to this organization since 2018. He's been a stout locker room guy, very well liked throughout both sides of the football, offense, defense. They always rave about the kind of person that Antoine Woods is. And then on the field, he had 7 starts last year. He had 10 stops, a sack in 2020. He'll be missed in his presence in terms of a rotational defensive tackle. But whenever you go out and you draft guys like you did on the defensive side of the football, like you said, it becomes a sobering week, and ultimately changes have to be made.
Well, and the other part of it, the main part of it with Antoine Woods, is he's a salary cap casualty. You've got younger players coming in who don't make as much money, and he was making over $2 million being a restricted free agent and signing the tender this year. All right, the Cowboys making another decision going back on Monday. They had to make a decision on a 5th-year option on Vander Esch. They decided to decline that option.
Yeah, very clear message sent from the front office this week. And even though they didn't say it specifically, they actually said it was a little bit further away from that. But whenever you draft a couple of linebackers and then you decline the option of a 2018 first-round picks, that's the message that nobody's job is safe. Micah Parsons, Jabril Cox, they're going to come in, and like you said, you got to find a shelf to put them on, find a place to play them. We'll talk with Mickey Spagnola about that in a moment, but Vander Esch could be a casualty of that. They want to see him prove it in his 4th year. They want to see him available. He missed 6 games in 2020, 7 in 2019, and he just hasn't looked the same since his rookie campaign in 2018. There's a lot to go for Vander Esch, one of the reasons why they declined the option.
Well, and I think I look at it this way, and I think Stephen Jones talked about it as well. You just look at the financial big picture in the National Football League and coming out of this pandemic, and the caps around the league, they went down this year, and so you're trying to figure out a way. As Stephen Jones said, they want Leighton Vander Esch on this football team going forward as well, and it's trying to figure out a way. What's the best way to fit his salary in his 5th year in the league and beyond into the cap year?
Yeah, you've got to find a way to meet that middle ground. Now, if he comes out and he has a fantastic year, he may want to test the market in the 2022 season, or at least going into that offseason. You got to find a middle ground, maybe even talk with him this offseason about a potential long-term extension if you want him legitimately on your football team. I think you have to make a decision between Leighton Vander Esch, between Jalen Smith, who is going to be the cornerstone of that defense, along with Micah Parsons moving into the future. And if it is Leighton Vander Esch, they need to start talking on a long-term deal.
Well, we're going to be talking with Mickey Spagnola coming up next here on the Blitz, and he is excited about the Cowboys' first-round draft pick. We'll tell you why when we come back in just a moment.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz. Bill Jones now joined by Mickey Spagnola of DallasCowboys.com as we break down this Cowboys draft class. And I think there is one man in America who is almost as happy as Micah Parsons that the Cowboys drafted Micah Parsons. And that would be Mickey Spagnola, because he called it going back to the first time you looked at any highlight tape of Micah Parsons.
I just think the guy is so special, Bill. And, you know, I heard somebody talking about the Cowboys draft, and they said, you know, there was a lot of good linebackers in this draft. The Cowboys didn't have to take the best one in the draft. And I'm going, seriously? Yes, they did. They still gave up 158.8 yards rushing last year a game.
All right, so how do they play Micah Parsons?
They put him on the field, Bill, anywhere you want to put him. And I think that's the beauty of Micah Parsons, that he's so versatile. You could put him at the weak side, you can put him in the middle, you can put him on the strong side. And the other thing he can do is not only is he versatile, he can play every down of football. And I don't care if it's first, second, third, or fourth, you just keep him on the field. He is that versatile, and I think that helps out Dan Quinn and how he tries to match up with different types of offense. If they want to play two tight ends, Micah Parsons can play in the field, and the Cowboys have enough versatility to play against a heavy run front. If they want to play nickel, he's good enough in nickel coverage. He can play any one of the linebacker spots and line him up as a defensive end if you want him to rush.
I think one of the best draft picks the Cowboys made was in the 4th round at 115, Jabril Cox, the linebacker out of LSU and North Dakota State.
And absolutely. And there's a guy that, you know, he's got versatility, but he's a pretty good guy in coverage. He can play on the nickel. I saw at North Dakota State in his 3 years, he had 14 sacks, but he also had 6 interceptions. So you can get him on the field, he can run. You can put Micah Parsons on the field, he can run. Vander Esch, he can run. So you've got enough linebackers you can confuse teams with how you line up on your nickel.
You know, the teams are so often in the nickel with a 4-man front. Dan Quinn talked about it after the draft. It will sort of look like a 3-4, and his defense last year in Atlanta, he says, sort of looked like a 3-4. How do you get all of these guys, these linebackers, into the mix where they get snaps, including Jalen Smith, who is accustomed to playing 70 snaps a game?
Yeah, I think a lot of that will have to do with how you match up against what the offenses do. And I think last year the Cowboys just didn't match up very well with offenses. And they wanted to play nickel all the time, but they didn't have enough nickel linebackers. Now they've got enough nickel linebackers. And even if we include Keanu Neal, right, Bill? They talked about the safety starting off as a linebacker. They know he can play safety. They may need him at safety. Who knows? Now that they've got all these linebackers that can run so well. But teams would take advantage of the Cowboys when they went to nickel and would bring in, try to play a single safety high, and they would bring in another safety to sit there as the strong side linebacker. They don't have to do that anymore. You know, they've got linebackers that can be versatile enough to stop the run, but also protect against the pass.
So how much is this defense upgraded, you think, this offseason?
Oh, I think it's upgraded greatly. Now, we'll see, right? But I think the first upgrade, Dan Quinn, right? I think he makes a huge difference on how he'll scheme this defense. That's what his calling card was before he got the head coaching job at Atlanta. And then he's got, like I said, so much versatility with his players that they can match up, I think. And look, if they could just be average defense, right? They were ranked 31st in run defense. If they can move that to 15 with this offense and what it should be able to be, that should be enough for this team to play awfully well this year.
Oh, it's going to be fun to watch, Mickey. We appreciate it. And up next here on The Blitz, we're joined by Will McClay to break down his draft class.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones here at the Star in Frisco. Now let's go across the studio to one Dave Hellman, who has a very special guest. That would be Will McClay.
Hey y'all, David Hellman here for DallasCowboys.com, and I spent enough time talking about the draft. Now I get to talk to the guy who actually knows the answers. I'm joined by Cowboys Executive Vice President of Player Personnel. That's a mouthful. Will McClay. Will, first off, have you caught your breath? How's life? Like, do you get to relax, or is that like after OTAs?
It's after OTAs. You know, we're always trying to improve. So we get a little bit of rest after the draft, maybe a day, but now let's keep moving forward.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this draft class. Cowboys drafted 11 players, first 6 on defense, first time that's happened in history. I think everybody kind of expected that, but to see it fall in order like that, first 6 players all coming on defense, was that by design, or did it really just happen to fall that fortuitously?
It fell that fortuitously. I mean, what we do is we put up our draft board with offensive and defensive players, and we give them their value. And then when it comes down, you know, we make the choice based on what's best for our roster. So we had players at the level, you know, as we went down our board, and there was offensive and defensive players, and they were close enough value, so we went with the defensive guys.
Awesome segue, because that's something that really fascinated me coming out of the draft. You know, y'all did your post-draft press conference. Jerry Jones mentioned there were about 6 guys that were really in contention to be picked on day 2 and day 3 after the first round, and you wound up with 4 of them. But I'm fascinated, what are those conversations like? Again, you know, you have a list of guys that you'd be happy with, but ultimately you have to pick one. What does that look like when you're saying, like, okay, we think we can afford to wait on this guy, or we can't afford to wait on this at all? What are those conversations like?
I think you go through it and you look at, so okay, you talk about positions and needs. When you do the draft, it's a combination of the two. It's best player available and position and need. When you put your draft board together, you're putting your draft board together with all of the players on there, and then when it comes down to decision-making time, you start deciding, okay, here's an offensive player or a defensive player. There are a few points between them. What's the best decision for us? And so as we went through it, you go down, and now the pick is up, and here's a guy here on the offensive side and a guy on the defensive side, and then we make that collective decision based on what our needs are.
So the headline grabber is obviously going to be Micah Parsons, and I know y'all aren't in a hurry to divulge how you want to use all of these linebackers just yet, but I can't help but notice Micah played defensive end in high school, did a lot of getting after the quarterback during his time at Penn State. How much did that ability as an edge rusher, as a guy who can pressure the quarterback, how much did that factor into his grade that put him up at the top of y'all's?
Well, when you have a linebacker that can impact the run in between the A gaps and the B gaps, and then they can chase and run plays sideline to sideline, but can also pressure, I think that adds value to the player. The way that the game is played now, it's a space game, as well as, you know, you need pressure, you need guys to be able to play in space. So, you know, he checked all of the boxes.
Okay, getting back to another really interesting thing that I thought you said on Saturday, and I've noticed it as well, is, I mean, obviously because of COVID-19, such a different draft process, and you brought up there's less of a pack mentality this year. Like, you're relying on your own people, on your own conversations. And not to say it was right or wrong, but from an outsider's perspective, the pick of Nahshon Wright at 99 was one that threw a lot of people for a loop. And obviously, y'all trust your grades, but I'm just curious, when you go through this process, when you look back at this draft, how does that weigh in? And maybe even do you look at other teams' picks and their evaluations and say, like, whoa, there's a pretty big discrepancy between what we thought about this guy and what they did? And how do you sort of evaluate all that after the fact?
That's exactly what we go through is, you know, it's like all of the pundits when you're going through the draft process, this guy should be taken here, should be taken there. They don't have awareness to the team's board and the way that we evaluate from the standpoint of the medical information and all the other information that we gather. So you look at the process and you say, okay, with Nahshon, we were looking at corners, we were looking at specific type of corners, we were looking to build our defense a certain way. He stood out there, and then when it comes down to making a decision, it was one of those players, and we needed more corners. And so we made that decision based on that, and then we still had our values of Cox and the other players, and as the board went, people were filling their needs, and so that allowed for those defensive players to be there for us the next pick.
All right, thanks, Dave and Will. And coming up next here on The Blitz, let's take a look at those flying under the radar in the draft class, the defensive linemen. The Blitz continues now from here at the Star in Frisco. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans. Of course, a lot of attention on the linebackers taking in this draft, the cornerbacks taking in this draft. Cowboys have improved this team or they added new players. We'll see how well they play at all three levels of the defense, though. The defensive line as well.
No doubt about it. I think the defensive line, there was a clear goal when it came to the defensive line. It was add some length. You look at the three players in which they added: Osa Odighizuwa, 84-inch wingspan, 84-and-a-quarter wingspan for Chauncey Golston and Quentin Bohanna. Even the defensive tackle, still very long at 6'4".
Well, and it gets back to Antoine Woods. We talked about the top of the show, 31-inch arms, and these guys all have 34-inch arms. You can break it down as simple as that.
You're exactly
Let's
right.
start with the first of the third-round picks, and that would be Osa Odighizuwa out of UCLA. What do you think of this guy?
Well, I think he's got a fantastic name. How about that? I love Odighizuwa. First team All Pac-12, 3-year starter during his time with the Bruins, and he ended up finishing his career with more tackles for loss than he did games started. 27.5 tackles for loss throughout his career, and that's exactly right. That's what the Cowboys are looking for him to come in and do. He's going to play inside. He might even play a little outside. He's a little undersized for a normal three-technique defensive tackle, but I think Odighizuwa could play the majority of his snaps right there because of his ability to stop the run, and that's what you're excited about with him.
Yeah, and they're also excited about the fact he's a 3-time state champion wrestler as well.
They like wrestlers. They went with a first-round pick who was a big wrestler.
That's exactly right. All right, how about the second of the third-round picks at number 84 overall out of Iowa, Chauncey Golston?
If you're looking for a Tyrone Crawford replacement, this is your guy. High character, a lightly recruited high school prospect who was just 3 stars, only had a couple of Power 5 offers. One of those was Iowa, and he went and he took clear advantage. Outworked some of the other higher recruits, earned his way to a starting job 3 years ago in his sophomore campaign, at least 8.5 tackles for loss in each of his last 3 years. He has also got a very high run grade coming out of the collegiate game. He's going to make an impact there. He's going to play inside and outside. I mentioned Odighizuwa. He'll probably stay mostly inside. Golston, on the other hand, will play that Tyrone Crawford versatility role where he will play on the edge. He will play a little 3 technique and a little bit in between in Dan Quinn's defense.
Yep, and he'll be listed as a defensive end on the depth chart, Mike McCarthy said, but you'll see him all across the offensive line. Now, we know where on the depth chart Quentin Bohanna will be listed. It's nose tackle on the depth chart. He's playing over the center.
1 technique all the way, and the reason why, look at the 327-pound tag on him. He played upwards of 360 at one point during his time in
say that
Lexington.
Again?
360. He is a trash can full of dirt, as we like to call him on the draft show multiple times. He was rumored going into the draft process to really have caught the eye of the Dallas Cowboys front office, and then when he was available later in the draft, they made the pick. 4-year starter with the Wildcats. He'll take up multiple gaps because not only his size, but he is super strong. He's got some huge hands. He plays with cinder blocks out in front of him, and ultimately a player that's going to take up space and try and open things up for the guys around him.
You know, one guy who's very happy with this draft selection, it is Hall of Famer, the Manster Randy White. He's been saying for 20 years the Cowboys need to get that big bazooka in the middle of the defensive line, and they found it in Quentin Bohanna out of Kentucky. All right, I wonder what numbers all these rookies are going to be wearing. We're going to tell you when we come back here on The Blitz.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours.
Okay, here it is. It's rookie jersey number time, and I love the first one on the list. Micah Parsons gets to wear his Penn State number 11.
Yeah, there was thought that he may have to stick with number 1, but apparently he had the conversation with Cedric Wilson and was able to pry that number away. He's going to look really good in 11. Ultimately, with all of these jersey numbers, I feel pretty good about what they look like. But we got to remember, last year, right before training camp, or right after training camp started, we saw another shift in the jersey numbers, and with the new rules, hey, there might be some changes from that graphic until the start of the season as well.
Hey, and you know what else is happening this coming week? We're going to find out exactly when and where, when we know where, but we're going to know when the Cowboys are playing all their opponents. The schedule's coming out this week. We'll break it down next week here on The Blitz. We'll see you next time.